Hola, it's Beto here, your daily divinity coach, here for episode 42 of my weekly series, Sunday Weekly Revival. I'm going to go ahead and tag a few friends so we can get a live audience going. If you're watching the recorded video, feel free to go ahead and fast forward for a few minutes while I tag some friends here. Perfect. Again, just tagging some friends so we can get a live audience going, and then we'll get started soon. I think that might be good. Oh, no, we got one more there. Just seeing who's live right now, and I think that might be good. So all right, there she is, my co-host and collaborator, Dr. Michelle Yanez. Dr. Michelle, my sound working? My sound okay? Shout out to Tia Malu. My Tia's here. If you can just throw some more hearts, just let me know my sound is working. Just do it. There they are. My sound's working well. Awesome. So while we're waiting for some more folk to join, I'm just going to go ahead and give a brief introduction. So again, if you're watching the recorded video, feel free to go ahead and fast forward a few minutes. So again, it's Beto here, your daily divinity coach, here for episode 42 of my weekly series, Sunday Weekly Revival. Episode 42 is entitled The Military Industrial Complex, Neil Young's Ohio. Ohio is a famous song by Neil Young back in the day. And the cryptocurrency craze. Yes, we're going to be talking about cryptocurrency. I know some of you have been waiting for this. So again, this is Sunday Weekly Revival. Today is Sunday, May 16th, 2021. So a little bit about me and what I do. So my background, from the age of 10, I was tutored by a mother in the law of attraction, into speaking things into existence, scientific prayer, all that fun stuff. So I know some young boys are tutored in, I don't know, baseball and things of that nature, soccer, or, you know, outside of the U.S., everybody says football for soccer, but, I was tutored to be a spiritual warrior from the age of 10. What else about me? I attended divinity school. I'm a graduate of Harvard Divinity School, where my course of study was liberation theology, social justice, studied with the likes of Cornel West and other great scholars, not the least of which was David Carrasco, the great Mesoamerican scholar, David Carrasco. Also, was taught my Mexica Azteca oral history by the great oral historian and philosopher, the Mexica Azteca, El Maestro Andres Segura from Mexico City. So I've had great teachers. I've had great teachers in my life, and so this is really me. Sunday Weekly Revival is an opportunity for me to give back. Because again, I've been so blessed with great teachers. Also, I did a self-study about manifesting immortality and being ageless. I never had an immortality coach or an immortality professor, but I did my own 10-year self-study, and so I talk about manifesting immortality or being ageless in addition to the law of attraction and in addition to social justice or liberation theology. I also produce bracelets, so if you haven't received a set of bracelets from me, please reach out. I just need a name and an address. People love these bracelets. They're awesome. The newest set is very colorful. There's one that reads ageless, there's one that reads limitless, and one that reads liberated. You're not going to want to miss out. You're going to want to have a set. So reach out. You can text me if you have my number. You can message me on Messenger, or you can go to my website, dailydivinitycoach.com. There's a form there you can fill out so we can get you out some bracelets. So what do I do on social media? I do a written paragraph, which I call Daily Divinity Coaching, and I put that up here on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter daily during the week. And then on weekends, I do live shows. Yesterday, we did a Saturday live show. My co-host and collaborator, Dr. Michelle Yanez, and myself. And it's called Live and Unscripted, and we do that 2 Saturdays a month. And yesterday, if you haven't seen it, was phenomenal. You can see the recorded video my my news feed. Yeah, it's there. So if you want to watch it, please do. We had 257 people watch live on Instagram yesterday. It was phenomenal. We had a terrific guest, Vera Jimenez, who's a KTLA Emmy Award-winning, two-time Emmy Award-winning meteorologist, and she's also a health advocate. And so she was on, and we talked about nutrition. The title of the episode was "You Are What You Eat." So we talked a lot about nutrition, but general health, fitness and whatnot. So it was a lot of fun, and I also posted the video recording from Facebook, but I also posted the video recording from Instagram, and I encourage you to watch both because the Instagram was awesome. Facebook, we didn't have we had to have Vera, because of technical difficulties, call in so you can hear her voice. But on the Instagram video, you can actually see her. She's actually live with us. And at one point, she becomes so enthusiastic that she actually shows her biceps. So it was awesome. And she gave her phone number out for anybody that wants to talk and interact with her. So check it out. It was awesome. It's a lot of fun. Those shows are unscripted, so we never know what's going to happen. It was not scripted, and the whole bicep thing. And so it was awesome. It was really neat. And that's why we do it, and that's why we had that format. These shows, on the other hand, I do have more or less a script. I spent a lot of time preparing the original content for Sunday Weekly Revival. And so I spent a lot of time because I feel personally that if you're going to give me your time, I'm going to give you my best. And so having said that, we're going to go ahead and dive into the content of the show. So we're going to start with the military-industrial complex. The acronym would be MIC. So what is the MIC? What is the military-industrial complex? It is a relationship between the military, right, the government, the military, and defense contractors, for-profit corporations in the defense industry. So there's these two entities, and there's a relationship between the two. So the government, the military, right, they obtain weapons and other services they need, including materials and whatnot. And the defense industry, they win because they get paid, right, for selling these goods, right, these armaments and services and other materials. And oftentimes they reap sizable profit margins. I've looked at some of these profit margins. They can be huge, especially in times of war. We're talking 50%, 100%, huge profit margins on the products and services they sell. And they're typically sold through government contracts, right? So in effect, it's us. It's the taxpayers paying for this. Let's not be mistaken there. We're a foot in the bill. The government is us, right? There would be no government if we weren't paying our taxes. So anyhow, where did it come from? Where did this term military-industrial complex come from? It was actually coined by U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower. And it was coined during his farewell address to the nation, which was televised nationally. And that address occurred on January 17 of 1961. Interestingly enough, President Eisenhower was the only general to be elected president in the 20th century, so in the 1900s. There were others before, but he was the only general to be elected in the 20th century. He had a lot of, he was a military general, right? So he's a military guy, right? And nonetheless, during his farewell address to the nation, he warned the nation, the country, about the inherent risk, the danger posed by the defense contractors corrupting political influence. So he was warning the nation, warning the U.S. people, the American people, about what he coined the military-industrial complex, about the ability for these defense contractors, right, Halliburton, all these other ones, to be able to have a corrupting influence on the political life of the nation. Eisenhower's warning proved prophetic, and not long after he left, the presidency, the U.S. entered Vietnam. It was an unpopular war, right? Unpopular war. The people rallied and they protested, especially on the college campuses, against the Vietnam War, and even politicians. Richard Nixon himself promised to end the war. I mean, there's politicians out there like Richard Nixon promising to end this unpopular war, but it kept going. Why did it keep going? Because of the military-industrial complex. There's people out there that reap, companies, entities out there that reap huge profits when the country is at war by selling armaments and materials and other services. Again, at sizable, sometimes huge, sometimes ridiculous margins, profit margins. And I encourage you to do the research if you're interested in looking at some of those profit margins. So anyhow, what's interesting today, because before World War II, or even during World War II, there really wasn't a defense contracting industry per se like there is today. So think about it. During World War II, what happened? Plants, right? Like Ford Motor Company, they had to retool, right? They had to retool, and all of a sudden they were, in the defense industry. They're providing warplanes. They're providing ships, right? They're building ships and warplanes and other materials and services for the war effort for World War II. But then after World War II, that's when it became an actual industry where you had companies, corporations dedicated to just that, right? Because what happened after World War II? Ford went back to making cars, right? But then all of a sudden this industry just, came up and just exploded. And again, the Vietnam era is when it really, just became apparent, the politically corrupting influence of the military-industrial complex on the will of the people, right? The will of the people was to end this unpopular war, but it continued. So anyhow, Neil Young, moving to Neil Young, right? Ohio, Neil Young's Ohio. So this song actually peaked at number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100. What was the song about? Neil Young was inspired. He was looking at Life magazine, these photos of the tragedy, a massacre at Ohio State University when National Guardsmen fired on unarmed students. 4 were killed and more wounded. And so he's looking through this Life magazine, and he's inspired, right, to do something. He wants to do something, and so he ends up writing this song, Ohio. And he wrote it, he composed it. Yet it was performed by Crosby, Stills and Nash, and reportedly Crosby, after the recording, he like buckled and was just crying. Because he was so moved, and saddened by the whole tragedy. Interestingly enough, there were AM stations that would not play the song Ohio on the air. Even in the state of Ohio, there were radio stations, AM radio stations that would not play the song Ohio. Why not? Because the song Ohio, it challenged the authority of the President Nixon's administration, right? So here's some of the words. I'm going to recite some of the words. I'm not going to sing it, but I'm going to recite actually the hook to the song Ohio. Tin soldiers and Nixon coming. We are finally on our own. So I'm going to stop there. So tin soldiers and Nixon coming. What does he mean by tin soldiers, Neil Young? Well, tin soldiers are highly collectible miniature figures of toy soldiers. So Neil Young is using tin soldiers here as the description for the National Guardsmen that fired on the unarmed students. Because what he's saying is that they're like miniature soldiers, right? They're young kids, the National Guardsmen who did this. They're like, tin soldiers. And then when he says we're finally on our own, what does he mean? Well, up to that point, it was National Guardsmen when they, went on campus like they did at Kent State University and deployed for these types of events. They typically didn't have live ammunition. But now all of a sudden, National Guardsmen were firing on unarmed American citizens, young unarmed American citizens. So when he said we're finally on our own, it's like this horror, right? That that the military, the government could do this to its own citizens. Then the end of the hook says, this summer I hear the drumming, 4 dead in Ohio. Obviously the 4 dead are the 4 students that were killed at Kent State University. Those 4 students' names were Jeffrey Glenn Miller, Allison B. Krause, William Knox Schroeder, and Sandra Lee Schuer, and I hope I pronounced that last name correct, Sandra Lee Schuer. And then 9 more were wounded, so four fatalities and 9 more wounded. So what's the background? What happened? So I'm going to give a day-by-day background of the events that occurred. So on April 29th, 1970, President Richard Nixon, or then U.S. President Richard Nixon, in a nationally televised address to the nation, announced the war in Vietnam was being expanded into Cambodia. Remember, Nixon in his 1968 presidential campaign had promised to bring the troops home from Vietnam. He reneged on this promise. He's actually now expanding the war in Vietnam into Cambodia. So that upset a lot of people, especially the anti-war protesters, right, who are mainly composed of students at that time. So there was a planned withdrawal on the table. There was supposed to be 150,000 American troops that were supposed to be coming home from Vietnam, but that was off the table now because now we had this expansion into Cambodia, and again, it upset a lot of people, especially the anti-war protesters, especially the student anti-war protesters. The day after that address, on April 30th, 1970, President Nixon was quoted as describing the anti-war protesters as bums. He called them bums blowing up college campuses. So he had no respect for the anti-protesters, for the anti-protest movement. At this point, he was all, drunk in power and in bed with the military-industrial complex. So then the next day, so now we're moving into May 1st, 1970, a beautiful spring day. It had been a long winter there in Ohio, and it's a beautiful spring day on the Kent State University campus. And as a result, students, as was the custom, went into downtown Kent. So they left the college campus and migrated down to downtown Kent for a Friday night of enjoying themselves, right? Because that's where all the bars were and the shops were in downtown Kent. And it catered to the students. And so the students went out down there and, started hanging out in the bars. There's a big time basketball game going on. So some of them were watching the basketball game. And so anyhow, at 11:30 p.m. that night on Friday, May 1st, a beer bottle was hurled at a police officer. The police, because there's, quite a crowd, right? It's like one of the first really nice days of spring, decided not to take action, and they retreated and waited for reinforcements to come. Then that crowd that was there just swelled. So at this point now, there's like 500 people, right, young people, and they begin blocking the streets, and they begin stopping motorists, and they start asking the motorists what their opinion is on the expansion of the Vietnam War into Cambodia. So then all of a sudden a riot breaks out. So you got all this going on, and then a riot breaks out. 47 office and business windows were smashed. 2 police officers were injured by objects being hurled at them. So again, now we have a riot. So then what happens next? So 12:30 a.m., the mayor of the town of Kent, Leroy Satram, declared a state of emergency. All bars are closed, right? He closes all bars, state of emergency. And so now there's relatively no reason to be downtown Kent. Other than if you're a student, everybody's now on the streets, right? So law enforcement takes initiative, and at 1 a.m. they begin using tear gas to disperse the crowd from downtown Kent, try to get the kids back, the young students back onto the college campus. Took about an hour, but peace did return to downtown Kent, albeit unsettled peace. But nonetheless, peace did return, and for the most part, they were successful in achieving their mission, their objective. 15 people, all Ohio residents, all residents of the state of Ohio, were arrested during that riot. So then what happens the next day? So now we're moving to Saturday, May 2nd, 1970. Well, the students are still upset, right? They're still upset about this expansion of the war in Cambodia, the expansion of the Vietnam War into Cambodia. And so they take initiative, and they end up, not all of them, but a group of them end up taking initiative and burning down the ROTC building on campus. Now, this wasn't the first time this happened. There are other campuses where the ROTC building was burned down. But it was the first time on the Kent State campus this happened. So it was a big to-do, right? It was a big to-do. The ROTC building is being burned down. So then what happens at this point? So enter the National Guard, right? The National Guard is now called upon to restore order, right? Restore order on the Kent State University campus. So now we're moving into Sunday, May 3rd. So there's now a curfew in effect, right? They put a curfew into effect, 8 p.m., right? Everybody needs to be sheltered in place. There's helicopters, right, flying all over, overhead, over the campus. And so the National Guard is now in charge of the campus. Again, this is Sunday, May 3rd. Nonetheless, the students are still upset, right, about the Cambodia, the war being expanded to Cambodia. And so they plan a protest for 12 noon, Monday, May 4th, 12 noon in the Commons, right, in the common area of the college campus, the university campus. At this point, students that went away for the weekend are coming back, right? It's Monday, the college professors are having their classes, and the protest is going to take place in the Commons at 12 noon. However, the National Guard wasn't going to allow it. They had a strict policy of no rallies, no protests, no gatherings, and they had the full intent to squash any assemblies because they're going to enforce this order. But the students, they believed in their right to protest, right? It's a right. They believed in it. And so at this point, right, as the morning's unfolding and 12 noon is approaching, right, the start of the protest, the students, the protest is now evolving from, yes, it's still a protest against the expansion of the Vietnam War in Cambodia, but it's now becoming more about the students wanting the National Guard off their campus, right? They want to be able to protest without the National Guard occupying their campus. So tensions are high. Professors at this point are encouraging students that Monday morning not to attend any rallies, any assemblies, any gatherings. They're imploring their students, right, not to gather, because they know that this order is going to be enforced by the National Guard. At 11:50 a.m., 10 minutes before the start of the protest, it's reported that there are National Guardsmen that riding around in jeeps. They're riding around the common area in jeep. They have a bullhorn, right, and they're announcing that there be no gatherings. For the people who are starting to gather early for the protest, they needed to disperse. They're unlawfully assembling, and they're under martial law, right? The campus is under martial law, and you got to do what the guard says. Nonetheless, the students continue to gather there in the Commons for the protest, for the rally. What does the National Guard do? Well, they start shooting canisters, tear gas. They're going to use tear gas. They shoot canisters into the crowd to get the crowd to disperse. There's approximately 800 students that are gathered there in the Commons at this point, and another 1,000 or so watching on the hillside, right? Bystanders watching, 800 there for the rally on the Commons. Now there's tear gas coming in, and the guard, they have their gas masks on, right? The students don't. The guards have their rifles. The students are unarmed. So then the guardsmen begin to march across the Commons, and they end up pushing the crowd up and over what they call Blanket Hill there on the Kent State University campus. Why is it called Blanket Hill? It's called Blanket Hill because apparently that's a place of romance, where romance blossoms, especially in the spring. So anyhow, the crowd is now being dispersed, and they're being pushed over Blanket Hill. Now, what we have to understand about the guardsmen, right, the National Guard, was these were for the most part young men that were guardsmen. They were not much older. The average guardman, not all, but the average guardman was not much older than the students who were there on the college campuses. So they shared the generational thing with the students. They were also sleep deprived. It was reported that no guardsmen slept more than 3 hours the night before because of all the activity that was taking place. Many of the guardsmen were scared. You got to remember, at that time, the National Guard was seen as a way to avoid going to Vietnam. A lot of people would join the National Guard so they wouldn't have to end up in Vietnam. So a lot of them were scared. They didn't want any conflict. They didn't want anything like that to take place. And a lot of them were also poorly trained. They're poorly trained. And we talked about the live ammo thing. It wasn't common for them to have live ammo in a situation like this. So as a matter of fact, that was the common opinion of the students, of the protesters, that there was no live ammo. And so they, went about with their protest and their rally because they really believed that there was no live ammunition, that the National Guardsmen had no live ammunition in those rifles. But they did. They shouldn't have, but they did. So at 12:24 p.m., so 24 minutes after the start of the rally, the National Guardsmen end up shooting at the students with live ammo. It's 12:24 p.m. and there were 28 guardsmen that shot from their rifles. Again, live ammunitions. 67 shots in 13 seconds. I mean, it happened fast, right? 67 shots in 13 seconds on the unsuspecting students. They didn't realize that the guard had live ammo. Anyhow, they ended up leaving 9 dead and 4 wounded. And some were, for the majority of those that were impacted, the fatalities, the wounded, they were far. They weren't near the guard. They were anywhere from 22 meters to 10 times that, 220, 230 meters away. So as a result, not all of the victims were part of the protest. Some weren't. Nonetheless, the majority opinion in the weeks that followed the protest was that the students had brought it upon themselves. So there's this blame the victim game going on, right? And we know how the lords of scarcity work. This is a common thing they do. They blame the victim. I did an episode on the Zoot Suit riots, right? The military, with a compliant Los Angeles Police Department, terrorized. They terrorized the Chicano community there in East LA, and assaulted young men, and not just Chicano. There's African American and Filipinos that were also assaulted too. And then what happens? The LAPD ends up arresting the victims, right? Those that were assaulted, blaming the victims. So this is a common theme when you look at how the lords of scarcity operate. So there's this whole blaming the victim thing going on. There's public demonization of the victims. There's 4 fatalities. 2 of the fatalities, one was ROTC. The young man was ROTC. The other was an honor student. Neither one had anything to do with the protest. The other 2 did, but 2 of them didn't. Nonetheless, they're demonized. Those who died, the 4 that died, and there's a rumor that was spread that they were drug addicts. Not true, but that rumor spread. There was a couple, a husband and a wife, and they actually penned a message, and they sent it to the local press, the newspaper based there in Kent, in the town of Kent, the Record Courier. And this is what they wrote. They wrote, "This is all very tragic. Yet, if this is what it takes to teach law and order to students, then this is the high price that must be paid to keep our country free." I mean, it's hard to fathom. It's hard to fathom, right, that somebody would pen that. But that was, again, sadly, the opinion of a lot of people, that they were blaming the victim. There must have been something wrong with the students, right, to have this come upon themselves. The students did nothing wrong. They're exercising their right to protest. That's what they were doing. And sadly, those young guardsmen had live ammo. They shouldn't have had live ammunition. They shouldn't have been ordered to shoot at unarmed civilians. But it happened. The tragedy took place. And Neil Young came out with that song, Ohio, which became an anthem. It became a counterculture anthem. It became the anthem of the anti-war protesters. So we're going to shift gears now. We're going to talk about the news. What's in the news? So on Wednesday, I don't know if you saw this or not, but on Wednesday, the CEO of Tesla, Elon Musk, he announced that Tesla was going to stop accepting Bitcoin, right, the cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, as payment for their electric vehicles. It is an interesting announcement because less than 2 months before, he announced that they would be accepting Bitcoin. But he had a change of heart within those 2 months. Why the change of heart? Well, Elon Musk said that he is not comfortable with the carbon footprint of Bitcoin. So that relationship between Tesla and Bitcoin wasn't going to work out because we know Tesla is about reducing the carbon footprint, right? And so he ended that relationship with Bitcoin and Tesla, which lasted just under 2 months. Nonetheless, in February, Tesla had bought $1.5 billion in Bitcoin, and they enjoyed huge paper profits from that purchase. I read the estimates, and they vary, but it looked like somewhere between 50 and 70% paper profits in quarter one for Tesla from that investment. So huge, right? Huge profits in a short amount of time. So they're riding that wave, right? That cryptocurrency wave. And an incredible 94% gain year to year for Bitcoin. 400% over the course of 2020. For the first time, Bitcoin hit that mark, right? $50,000 in early 2021. So Elon Musk, Tesla is part of that, riding that cryptocurrency craze, right? That speculative crave that came about during 2020, early 2021. What else is in the news? What else do we see in the news in regards to cryptocurrency? Well, last week, a criminal cyber group called themselves DarkSide hacked the Colonial Pipeline, the data of the Colonial Pipeline, forcing the company to shut down approximately 5,500 miles of pipeline. Almost half of the entire east coast of the United States was affected. What did these hackers want? They're holding. They end up holding that data as ransom. They demanded $5 million They demanded payment to give back the data to the Colonial Pipeline, and reportedly from strong sources, the hackers received $5 million in ransom. How was that ransom paid? It was paid in Bitcoin, in cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency, big time in the news this week, right? But we're not here to talk about speculation and all those types of things. We're here to talk about the significance of cryptocurrency to spirituality, because this is Sunday Weekly Revival, right? So here we go. The cryptocurrency craze, it's really indicative of our collective souls, right? Our collective spirits yearning for another form of currency. However, despite its promise, there's this promise that cryptocurrency is going to be more democratic, right? It's going to, do all these great things for folk. But the reality is, if you look at the roots of cryptocurrency, its roots are in the dark web, right? Where criminal groups, cyber groups like DarkSide exist, right? And other, groups that are into black markets and whatnot. That's where they exist, in the dark web. Not fully, but that's where they prefer to do their transactions, particularly in cryptocurrency, because they have anonymity, so that governments, it's hard for governments to track their transactions and go after them that way. In contrast to if they're using, government issued money. So I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a TV series called Startup. It was initially released in 2016 by Crackle. And it's all about cryptocurrency and the dark web. And there's 3 seasons that were recently released on May 4th on Netflix. And I binge watched the whole thing, all 3 seasons in preparation for the show. But it's fascinating. It's not for children, so there's the disclaimer. But it's fascinating. They have a cryptocurrency on the show called GenCoin, and then they have this the Arachnet, right? Which, like a dark web type of thing, or bad things happen. Anyway, it's a fascinating show. It's called Startup. But anyway, back to the spirituality piece. So cryptocurrency, like government-issued currency, remember we talked about the Dutch East India Company? Like their currency, right? They came up with their own currency. They had that ability, and they circulated a currency. So like corporate currency, like government-issued currency, it's man-made. Cryptocurrency is man-made. But there are 2 currencies that are priceless, that are not man-made. There's love, right? And there's time. And so our collective spirits they're recognizing there's a change coming, right? There's a yearning for a currency change to come. And none know this better than the Silicon Valley billionaires, Peter Thiel and others, right? They know this. And that's why they're investing millions of their own dollars, billions of other people's dollars, in producing biotechnologies to manifest immortality, right? They see this currency revolution coming, and they're all in, right? They're all in, especially Peter Thiel. But he's got his group around him, and they're all in. But what they don't realize, it's not just a currency revolution that's coming, it's a spiritual currency revolution that's coming. And so even though they got all these resources, all this money, all these scientists working for them and technologists and everything else, they lack the spiritual resources to actually get it done, to manifest immortality. Now, I'm going to say this, that, there's things they're working on, which, I do hope they find solutions for, like Alzheimer's, and they're working on different aging diseases. But nonetheless, as a currency revolution, as manifesting immortality, they lack the spiritual resources to get it done. Because we know, right, through ancient texts what it's about. It's about flipping the script, right? It's about the least of these, right? The revolution is for the least of these. It's not for the Silicon Valley billionaires who've already had theirs. It's for the folk that haven't had theirs. We know, I talked about Toni Morrison in one of my shows about her Jefferson lecture. Remember that? We talked about how she said the future, right? Well, she actually posed it in a question, but in reality what she was saying is the future, we're lied to. The lords of scarcity lie, and I'm paraphrasing, they lied to us. They tell us the future's in the hands of the technologists, right? The Silicon Valley billionaires and whatnot. Elon Musk, or, all those folk, Peter Thiel. But it's not. It's not. It's in the hands of those that have been pressed to the margins. Us. So we have this spiritual currency revolution coming, right? That's for the least of these. And we know also through ancient texts that it's going to be the righteous, right? Those that care for the least of these, those that care for the causes of the least of these, that's going to inherit the earth, or as I would say, the fifth world, right? The Hopi Maya prophecy of the fifth world. So I've said a lot. So I'm going to stop here. I'm so grateful for you watching, those watching live, as well as those watching the recorded video. This has been a blessing for me. You bless me when you watch and provide feedback, because I get comments and whatnot. I'm just really blessed. And so, again, I'm stopping now. This has been episode 42, the military-industrial complex, Neil Young's Ohio, and the cryptocurrency craze. If you missed any part of this episode, I'm going to be posting the recorded video so you can go back and watch. Blessings to you this day. May you have a blessed rest of the day or evening, wherever you may be. Bye-bye. Ciao.